Welcome to the Rogue Startups Podcast, where two startup founders are sharing lessons learned and pitfalls to avoid in their online businesses. And now, here's Dave and Craig.
All right, welcome to Rogue Startups, episode 179. Today, we bring back Mr. Matt Medeiros. How are you doing today, Matt?
Dave, I am doing fine. It is the first time I'll be playing golf this season tomorrow, so I am just excited to get out there.
Very nice, very nice. Yes, summer has finally decided to stick its head out of the hole around here as well, and we are enjoying that, although it's a very mixed bag at times.
Yep,
yeah.
Sure.
So for those of you in the audience today, Craig is out at WordCamp Europe. And in honor of Craig not being here, we decided that we were going to go on a WordPress rant today. So I brought my favorite ranty WordPress guy back on, and we are going to talk about stuff that's going on in WordPress today. So if you're not into WordPress, I'm sorry. This episode today is probably going to be largely about WordPress, maybe a little about business and the intersection of those two topics, but you know, they're things that are near and dear to mine and Matt's heart and our livelihoods. So they're definitely things that are worth talking about. And if you're working on a WordPress plugin or a theme, or you're looking to get into this space, or you even work in this community, or you even have a WordPress site, I think this episode will still be relevant to you because there's a lot of stuff that's going on right now in the community and in the space in general. And it's going to affect you or impact you one way or another. So with that said, let's jump right in, Matt.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, so my opening salvo here is going to pull no punches. What do you think of the whole Guttenberg situation in WordPress right now? I could use other adjectives which would color my impact on this one, and we'll definitely hear my impact or my opinion in a minute, but I'd like to start with your take on this.
Burn it all down, Dave. That's what I say. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Look, I think at least from my perspective as somebody who is a critic of WordPress, not critical, but just a critic of WordPress, not to get confused. The whole thing is a movement that has to happen for wider user adoption. And I guess one could argue, do we need more user adoption? Do we need to continue to grow? I think, as an entrepreneur myself, I say yes, right? I say yes. I know there's a lot of people out there that say, hey, it should stay this one track. And 35% of the modern web is good enough. Why do we need more? I do really admire Matt's motives to democratize the web, although that's been skewed a little bit as the years have gone on. I think the thread and the pulse of that is still around. And I am a true proponent for freedom of speech and being able to publish your thoughts and make a movement happen online. And I do not like platforms like a Facebook, a LinkedIn, a Medium, where they want you to publish all of your stuff there so that they can control it. So at the end of the day, I want WordPress to succeed in the utmost, ways of success can be had. Now, Gutenberg rollout, communication factors play a huge. The communication plays a huge factor on what I would say is not a catastrophic rollout, but certainly a turbulent one. From an end user's perspective, like what is this new thing I'm playing with, to the community's side of it, people who have been contributing to WordPress for years, being like, we're just being totally ignored on a lot of this stuff. And it goes from, user experience of the software. It goes from usability of the software all the way down to like the real technical components and the accessibility of the software, just lots of things that were in motion where people are like, my God, why can't this just wait another 6 months? When I talk to small businesses, as I mentor a lot in an accelerator that I'm in locally, and if people who listen to my podcast have probably heard me say this a million times, every 6 months, there's 12 new businesses that come in, not any different than what Craig's in right now with Castos in his accelerator. And these are small businesses, traditional businesses in my local market. And I would say 0.5% of these entrepreneurs can handle WordPress. And they all default to Squarespace, Wix, and even some Weebly. And usability factor, that's why. So when I see something like Guttenberg, I am excited for it because I want more small businesses to own their content and their platform. I don't want them to see them go to a closed CMS, but at the same time, I think the biggest thing that has happened is just the catastrophe around the communication aspect of all of this stuff. And for every time you see the communication barrier break down, you're like, geez, that'll never happen again. It happens again. And you're just like, why aren't we learning our lessons every time this happens? So I guess I'm 50-50 on the whole thing. I like the idea of it. I want WordPress to succeed. I just didn't like how it's rolling out. And I am still having a heck of a time publishing with Guttenberg. So the software's still not up to par. That's where that takes me.
Yeah. All right. So I have to say your take was very well spoken. I agree with you on a lot of those points. And I think the key one that I'd like to emphasize here that I think is the one thing that's probably going to start biting the WordPress community in the ass is the fact that most entrepreneurs are getting overwhelmed or intimidated by the complexity that's on WordPress. And until we can fundamentally solve that problem, I think we're going to cap out. And I don't know when that is going to happen. And I don't know what that looks like. But there is definitely a significant percentage of people out there that are able to technically handle it. But you get the newbies on here. And we're definitely at a point in the curve, the adoption curve, where the newbies are coming on board. And if you're not, handling the newbies well, your platform's just not growing.
Yeah.
And there's I look at a variety of crazy statistics. And some of these are just they're dumb. Like if you look at WordPress versus Wix versus Weebly versus Squarespace on Google Trends, you'll see WordPress is going down. But it's been going down for years. And I don't believe that actually, I think people are just more aware of WordPress. And so they're not searching about, well, what is WordPress? Because that's what that sort of picks up. But there are things that I do find that are interesting that tell me this whole Gutenberg debacle is exactly that, a debacle. I hesitated to use that word when I opened this up because I wanted to, give you the openness to present your opinion, although I'm pretty sure that you were in line with where I was at. But in this particular case, so I'm looking at the plugin dashboard on one of my sites. And if I look at the number of installs on the classic editor versus the number of installs for Gutenberg, the numbers on these things are astoundingly telling. So the classic editor has 5+ million active installations. So at this point, it won't tick up until it gets 6 million installations. But that's a big, beefy number. Now, if I look at Guttenberg, it says that it has 200,000 active installations, which if you do a little bit of math on that one, that is a significantly lower percentage of adoption there. We're talking, 4%? If I'm doing that right mentally? Mm-hmm. Probably not. Yeah. But 4% adoption on all the sites. That tells me something, especially this late in the game, because Gutenberg came out, December? December-ish. Yeah. Yeah, December is when it got pushed in WordPress 5. And here we are 6 months later, and we have 4% adoption. Now, I can tell you as a plugin author that when I push out a new version, it takes me about 6 months to probably get anybody who wants to upgrade. And here we are at that 6-month boundary. And we have 96% of the people that are flipping the middle finger saying, I'm sticking with the classic editor, thank you very much. And the whole BS line that Gutenberg was for new publishers and that, all these people that have never used WordPress before, they love Gutenberg. Well, how deep did anybody go with those usability studies here? Because every WordPress professional that I've seen tweeting about this, so Jennifer Bourne runs an agency out in Sacramento, California, big person in the WordPress community. She was posting online about how much she was really struggling using Gutenberg and how much it gets in her way and how frustrated she was by this. And then Angie Meeker, who's at Customer Success at Opt-in Monster, chimed in and said, hey, yeah, me too. And these are people that are using WordPress on a daily, minute-by-minute basis, and they're deep experts in these things. And if they're struggling, well, what chance do the rest of us have,
Yeah, I remember when I first started using it, and I held off upgrading, and I was like, finally, I'm just going to activate it, and because I don't do a lot of long form publishing on my site. It's really just putting up my post for my podcast or whatever. And then I was like, I'm just going to put in a list, just a regular unordered list with little bullet points. That's all I want. And I could not get that damn block to render correctly while I was typing. And then I was like, I put it in the wrong place because I hit enter. And now I had to like grab it and drag it up a little bit. And I was just like, I just literally spent 5 minutes trying to put in a list in between two paragraphs. And I was like, how is this even ready? There's still lots of friction. And one thing I just want to say about the numbers, I think the classic editor is more telling because I don't think we can really look at the Guttenberg plugin anymore in terms of indication because now it just ships with core, right? So is the Guttenberg plugin installation still telling? Certainly from the reviews, there's a lot of data and insights in there.
Yes, there are 2,794 of them as of this publishing date right here. And it's an average rating of 2 stars. So, that's some opinions there.
The thing is, I'll preface all of this by saying, like, I wouldn't want to be Matt, okay? I do not envy his position in making any of these decisions. And let's all be honest. I think the elephant in the room, and it's even more telling as we saw somebody like Yoast from Yoast SEO step down out of the marketing position, alluding to the fact like, look, I thought I was going to be sort of maybe a talking head for WordPress in a good way. Maybe I was able to position WordPress with the community and maybe other partners. It doesn't look like he can. And just as the months go on, you kind of learn that, well, Matt is the deciding factor in all of this stuff. So I preface all of this saying, like, all of these decisions that are being made, big swath decisions that happen with this project come from Matt, right? And I think we can all agree on that. And I wouldn't even say Matt would say yes to that. So I don't envy being in his position to have to make these difficult decisions. And I think what he's looking at is, oh my God, how do I keep WordPress relevant in this super hyper fast changing economy? And he's a lot more poetic than I am. Very difficult person to interview too. I've had the pleasure of doing it a couple times. He's very poetic in all of this stuff, a very deep thinker. But I think at the level that he's flying at, when he looks out his window, he sees, bigger organizations, bigger impacts that he can make with WordPress that you and I don't see, right? Even a million page view a month blog that, you and I might run or know people who run, even that is like just a fly on the elephant's ass. It doesn't make a mark compared to what he thinks he can do with WordPress. So I think this was a difficult decision for him to make. I think he knew that there was going to be some fallout from this, but I think he just said, look, in order to move the needle, I have to do this now. And I think Matt is not so different than you and I as small business owners, where there's plenty of time and not enough resources. Even a company the size of Automatic with 900 plus people, like when you look at how he spoke about Jetpack before Jetpack was Jetpack, like he talked about Jetpack in a way of being a game changer 2 years before it really, until we all started to realize what this plugin was about to do. He was already talking about it 2 years prior. So he's just like you and I, like he's got these visions, but even with all these people and all the money that he has, he still can't ship the perfect product, right? He's still like, man, I want that feature, but it still takes time. Still takes time to develop. And I think that's what we're seeing. And I think Guttenberg was him looking at what he's been doing with Jetpack and be like, I just need to ship this thing. I need to get this thing moving. I can't wait like I did with XYZ products and features in the past. I need to do this now. And that's where I think and how I think all of this sort of unraveled in terms of getting it out the door. But, feature-wise, code-wise, and there's a lot of team core players that just aren't listening to the rest of the people. And we don't know why. That's the challenging part for us in the 1% of WordPress.
So are you familiar with the Perl community at all?
I'm not.
No. Okay. So let me take you back into a little bit of the past here and expose my age a little bit. So in the 90s, Perl was a very popular web language, and it was used a lot for gateway scripts that would do back-end processing. So Larry Wall was the creator of Perl. And there were many famous sayings attributed to the Perl language, like Tim Toady, there's more than one way to do it. Which is a really horrible thing to say about a language. It should be more clear and easy to program in, but that's my personal aside on that one. But one of the comments, and I don't remember if Larry said this himself or somebody said this about Larry, but it got attributed to the Perl language itself, and that was a camel is a horse designed by committee. And it was a commentary about Perl and how features kept getting bolted onto the side, and eventually, like, Perl 6 became this massive nightmare where they tried to make it object-oriented, and it just didn't go well. And because everybody wanted everything that was going on, they wanted all this networking stuff added in, and then they want all this object features added in, and then they want memory protection and this and that, and then all of a sudden you've got this cacophony. It makes me wonder if that's where we're at with WordPress at this point, that we have this, by democratizing the web, we now have this group of people that all have competing agendas or different priorities. That's probably a better way to say it. Competing agendas makes it sound like they're all at conflict, but really different priorities. There's a lot of, when I came into WordPress, it was all about, hey, this is an easy way for me to set up and build a website. Publishing posts, yeah, that's great on a blog, but if I'm just trying to set up a marketing site for something, that was WordPress was the go-to thing for that. So have we gotten into that point here with the WordPress community, in your opinion?
So I have a lot of, it's definitely just my opinion, but there's a few things I think at play. So again, one of the statements that I really got behind from Matt, which came out years ago, sort of went away for a little bit, but now I'm starting to hear it come back again, is he wanted WordPress to be the operating system of the web. And when I first heard that and first heard him talking about that, I was like, this is a mission I can get behind. This is a mission I can build a business around, because, if we're really making this the central part of all these things we can do on the web, again, just thinking about this 5 or 8 years ago, whenever he had said it, I was thinking of things like, wow, WordPress could tap into anything. It could just be this UI control panel for anything, right? Anything on the web. And I was like, this is awesome. And that's really what was like, this is the right place to be. And then I think what has happened over time is that was just become a huge task for him to take on, right? I think it's just way too hard for him to take on with the technology that he had at the time. And then it sort of just became this, stomping ground for, web consultants and website builders to just build sites. And then people were doing some other cool things with like building apps out of it and whatnot. But like you said, it just became this like Frankenstein of stuff. And now of course it's come back, like the phrase, the operating system for the web is back. And I have some ideas around that. And it obviously has a lot to do with Guttenberg. But I think the other reason why he said we need to ship this now is because WordPress got so big, it became its own worst enemy, in the sense of, well, we've got Elementor, we've got Beaver Builder, we've got all of these other page builders, right? We got themes that do all of this stuff. And now we have web hosts, very large web hosts that are changing the way that WordPress acts when somebody first installs it. It comes preloaded with all these themes and other plugins. And, maybe the dashboard looks a little bit different. The experience of WordPress is changing. And to the point where it was like, people are going to get frustrated with using WordPress, and it's not vanilla WordPress. In other words, it's not the way that, Automatic and the .org contributors in the community had envisioned it. It was the way Elementor envisioned it. It was the way GoDaddy envisioned it. And I think Matt has seen that and says, okay, we need to get that experience under control. Much like you would, compare iOS to Android. Right? Android has 50, I don't know, probably even more, 100 hardware manufacturers out there that do Android all in different ways. And then Apple is just Apple and iOS is just iOS. I think we talked about this when you were on my show. And he needs to rein in that experience, because what it's causing is too much fragmentation. And if people didn't like the way they use WordPress with Elementor, they just blame WordPress. WordPress is, too much stuff going on. It was slow, it was clunky, it got hacked, and I don't trust WordPress anymore. It wasn't WordPress's fault. It was the big hunking layer of, let's say, and I'm not saying Elementor was exposed or whatever, hacked or whatever. I'm just using it as an example. This plugin made me have this problem, and I don't like WordPress now.
Yeah.
Matt needs to rein that in for the sake of WordPress, but the other side of that coin is for the sake of revenue, right? And that is, that's the investor side, that's the automatic side, that's the Jetpack side, where this cohesiveness has to come together in order for him to monetize it more effectively. I'm not saying that's the goal or that's his primary focus, but it is a focus for sure.
Well, good. I'm glad you brought up Jetpack here, because that was another thing I wanted to rant about it today. So you mentioned that one of his goals here is to monetize, and obviously they're trying to do that through Jetpack. Now, a pretty vocal criticism of Jetpack is that they're basically doing all of these things that they for years have told the rest of us. You're not allowed to create a marketplace. You're not allowed to promote your items in certain parts of the pages. You're only allowed a certain level of advertising inside of things. And these were all informal guidelines, less so than, formal prohibitions, although that's slightly changed, I think, with the guidelines over the years, and it's evolved slowly. But it just seemed like the way, for example, search in Jetpack suddenly got done where somebody could actually promote their results above everybody else's. And it was kind of done in a very ham-fisted way. And it almost seemed like Jetpack and Matt were just giving the middle finger to the rest of the WordPress business world. What do you think about that? And what should they have done better, and what should they be doing now to really address that moving forward?
There's a lot here too. Where do I begin?
Just let it all out, Matt. Just let it fly.
At one point in my career, we were selling themes, and we had started, I can't even remember now, maybe 2008-ish, 2009-ish. I should say that I also was one of the very first people, to my knowledge, to ever sell Drupal themes, and that's how I got into discovering WordPress and selling digital products. I used to sell a theme called Drupal Real Estate, and I had the domain Drupal Real Estate till I realized it was, against copyright laws to have that domain. But anyway, that's another story.
Yeah.
But that was a really successful product. Anyway, I remember getting into the theme space and realizing how politically driven decision making was to get themes up there. And then there was a whole gamification of the system, because back then, basically, if you just had a team of people to review themes in the review queue, you would be able to choose which theme you could put on the featured page of WordPress.org, which maybe at the time was like the 70th most trafficked website on the internet. And famously, CyberChimps, which was owned by Trent Lipinski at the time, just employed a bunch of people to review themes, and that's how he got CyberChimp. I think that was the name, or Responsive was the name of the theme, up to the top of the selection pool every single month. And it was just like that's when people started to find gold in the theme business, and people started to rush over there, and it really started to get flooded. But I remember submitting themes, and it's just the ambiguity of it all is just, hey, we had a theme called Journal, and that was the name that we thought, because, yeah, a little bit of SEO, but you want to start a journal online, you would pick this theme called Journal. And I remember submitting the theme and the name getting denied because it was too generic, right? But there were like other themes in the repository, like Paper, Canvas or whatever, and it's just like, how did this get denied, right? And it goes down to, one or two people at the time that make this decision, but then it's like other people get through it. And then as you go through the review process, you get new reviewers, you get spit to the back of the line, that kind of thing. And because these are all not freelancers, what's the word I'm looking for? People who are just giving their time for free to do this stuff. Volunteers. Since they're just volunteers, a lot of them are just anti-business. Hey, we don't like the way you worded this call to action to upgrade to pro, or you have too many pro call to actions. And let me just be the first to say, like, we never littered our theme with pro call to actions like other people did, but it was always like this minefield that you had to walk through to get these things approved with no real rhyme or reason. And I had always said to myself, why don't they just tax us, right? Why don't they just make it a marketplace? Because if you do the math, it's probably hundreds of millions of dollars worth of transactions that happen through the .org experience and just go off and spider off to all of these other shops like yours and mine. Just make it a marketplace and tax us. And again, I think that's just a piece of the puzzle where Matt was like, this is uninteresting to me because I have bigger plans for WordPress. And then the whole Jetpack thing comes out and you're just like, geez, air quotes, the same organization that's been telling me not to do this stuff is now doing this stuff. And it was definitely a slap in the face. And one of the things that really got me, which I had a whole interview with Matt about, was, once Jetpack started to monetize, he started to do his marketing around Jetpack, and it was the WordPress adoption has really grown since Jetpack. Jetpack has really stimulated the growth and the adoption of WordPress. And I wrote a blog post called the Digital Blue Collar Worker. And I was like, no, the reason why WordPress has grown so much is because of people like me at the time was responsible for, 1,000 websites online using WordPress through my agency and consulting people and having other people I know use WordPress. Folks like listening to this show who have helped the same amount of number, if not more or less, people get online. It's the WordPress consultants, the WordPress developers that really push this forward.
Amen, brother. Preach.
Yeah. and that was my whole thing around that. And, when you see when you go back to Guttenberg, you see that rollout, you see what's happened with Jetpack, you're just like, why aren't the developers, the boots on the ground really being spoken to? This is when you realize that we don't have a WordPress software problem. It's just the human problem. It is the same problems that we all face in our daily lives with whatever, family members, local government, state government, federal government. Why aren't people listening to us? We're doing this here already. Something very similar to this is I live in a smaller city outside of Boston, about an hour south, and this friend of mine, she started a co-working space, one of the very first co-working spaces here on the South Coast a couple of years ago, and people had no idea what co-working spaces were. So she's been going around having to hustle and draw people in, and now the city, here we are 2 years later, and she's always out there like, we need co-working space, we need to, evangelizing for this whole movement with no help from the city, only to find out the city now has plans to build their own $12 million city-funded / state-funded co-working and arts center without even asking her anything, and it's moments like that where it's like you're beating the drum, you're the hard worker, you're the boots on the ground, and then the Death Star shadows over the sun, and you're just looking at it going, where the hell did that thing come from?
Dun, 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 dun,
that's sort of
dun,
where it's
dun,
exactly. That's where it's all, how it all, falls out in my head.
So by that, does that mean that Matt Mullenweg is Darth Vader, or is he the Emperor? And if he's the Emperor, who's Darth Vader? No, I'm kidding. I mean, that's being overly dramatic about the whole thing there. But I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I've absolutely agreed that there's definitely. I mean, Matt is a visionary. Matt is an idealist. You can't separate that from his overall plans for WordPress, and that. I think that's the thing that for me as a pragmatist and a businessman, I struggle with the most, because I mean, the idealism is great and the visionary thing is great. But at the end of the day, for me, there has to be a practical working set of things to base stuff on. And WordPress, like it or not, for better or for worse, is now a business-oriented platform. People are doing business with it. They're running their businesses on it. They're using the platform itself to create a business for themselves. And I think that's getting wholly ignored by the idealistic faction of WordPress, and a lot of them sit on the core teams. A lot of them are sitting on the plugin and theme review things, and so they run into the stuff that you talked about earlier, where your theme stuff gets denied for too many CTAs. And I mean, it can be pretty heavy-handed. I think they've pulled it back a little bit in the last few years, and it's gotten a little bit better. But if you're a new person coming in now trying to launch something, the whole experience it's intimidating and it's different and it's a lot harder than it used to be. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. We haven't really even sort of breached like the whole cross-branding experience that Automatic and their services gets to enjoy by being able to use the words WordPress and their, brand experience and maybe even signage and verbiage, being so closely associated to the term WordPress just brings in so much trust. When somebody says, I want to go get WordPress, and where do I go get that? Well, you get it at the most trusted source. Of course, you go to Jetpack and or Automatic, right? And they can leverage that. And we actually haven't even seen. We haven't even begun to see how they are going to leverage that. And when you look at Jetpack, and I don't know, the most recent block was I think like a lightweight membership block. Like you start to realize that they will go after every single feature and plugin that's out there because they want people to use Jetpack. Right? They'll have 1,000 blocks in Jetpack by, in another year from now, and you'll get it all for $59 a month or $59 a year, whatever Jetpack premium costs or pro costs. And you're going to get a ton of other services for it. It's going to totally demolish a lot of small business plugin developers. And that's just not fair. And Automatic and Matt can leverage this to an extent that other people can't. And the one thing that has really bothered me recently is the human capital that Automatic and Matt have just lost out of sheer disregard or just, I don't know, just being naive to the sense that people who are giving their time, right? I won't name names, but there are people that were in community positions who had thought that they were in lead roles in this community position, the marketing position. Was one of them. And I guess I can mention her name, Bridget. She has talked about this online before, and it's just like, oh, this is not a real role. All of this time you've put into this, sorry, we're just going to push you aside, and we're going to place Yoast in this place. Okay. And then I see other things. I see other, there's a woman that was leading the accessibility efforts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you get the sense that, we want 5 for the future. We want you to give. This is open source. You must, and I saw the new lead of community sort of put out like this illustration of a ladder of how one becomes a key figure in the community and starts by, volunteering your time, and you sort of work up this ladder. Wait a minute. Hold the phone. Okay? Because nothing is assured in any of this stuff. Okay, if you want me to work this way, I need assurances, right? What are you going to do for me for 5 for the future? Oh, you're giving back. You're making this product and project even bigger.
Yeah,
great.
This is not a job description here where you're guaranteed a certain salary a year and a career track. This is very much pie in the sky. Contribute thousands of hours, and maybe we'll recognize you in the future. I mean, that's bullshit, really.
And one last thread of thought on that really, really angers me is when I see people who, they come to Twitter and they're like, I can't make ends meet. I've got medical bills. I've got bills. I've got to, put food on the table. Any kind of help that you can get me by retweeting or offering me a job or doing a Kickstarter. And it's underlined by I've been a volunteer for 5, 8, 10 years in the WordPress space. Jesus, okay, Jesus. It just angers me because I feel like sometimes like there's this false sense of community. Sometimes like,
yes.
Don't worry, give, and you're gonna get there. And who's really making out in all of this stuff? which is why I try to do my small pieces. I'm not a developer. I don't contribute time on WordPress.org. I don't answer questions on forums, but I try to stick up for people that I see getting lost in this conversation, and as a critic. And that's the one that really bothers me the most, is when people get into this and it's like, give wholly to WordPress. And then when it comes to a critical point in their lives where they actually need help, it's like, okay, the community, and I'm not saying that Matt has to do something about this, but there has to be some guidelines to, maybe tell people to pump the brakes, maybe don't commit so much time, because we don't know what's really going to happen with this stuff. That's the ones that really bother me the most.
Or maybe have some paid positions. Maybe, instead of Automatic being this, sole paid entity out here, that it have all these community positions where they're like trying to get people to volunteer their time. Well, let's actually say, all right, if you contribute to this part of the code right here, we're going to pay you X dollars for that. But we're also going to vet who's coming in to get that. So you get good people, they actually get compensated for it. No, it's not the democratic ideal of contribute all this and, open source, rah, rah, rah. But, you have less of that. Oh, God, I remember this specific one on Twitter that you're talking about, and it broke my heart to see that. I mean, right. I stopped and I had to reread it 3 times to make sure I was actually reading what I thought I was reading. And it was unbelievable. Just unbelievable. Yeah.
Yep. Or more recognition, right? I mean, at the end of the day, just more recognition, more visibility to people who are volunteering, so that, if along the way they are looking for work or somebody's looking for work, is there a way to dip into this pool of volunteers to say, hey, this person's great at XYZ, I want to hire her. This person, she's a great developer, I got somebody on my project, I'm going to hire her, right? Just some visibility to these volunteers, greater visibility. I don't know, but that's like a whole communications thing, I guess.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, can you think of how many WordPress agencies would salivate to have a pool of 1,000 vetted contributors? I mean, every single one of them would be snapped up and hired if they really wanted to work. If they needed to work, if they wanted a paycheck and they weren't getting one, they could find that work easily. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that is frustrating. What else did I want to rant about here today? I think we ranted about a lot of good stuff here. Well, you touched a little bit on Yoast's departure. And, when I saw that on post status, when somebody had posted that he tweeted that he was leaving, and I went and checked it out on Twitter and back on post status, back and forth. I actually, sent a message to Yoast and I said, hey, I'm really sorry this didn't work out, because I thought if anybody was going to make a difference in this position, that it was going to be you. And I thought you had like the right, it was basically a really good intersection of communication, position in the community, development skills, marketing skills, understanding of the space. Like, there just weren't a lot of people that had all of those things. Not that I'm knocking Bridget and she shouldn't have had, the role that she did and got knocked out of that. I mean, that's a whole different story. But, if Matt was going to try to handpick somebody and make this work, Yoast wasn't a bad choice. All right. So let's talk about that for a second. Here you have this guy that runs literally the most successful SEO plugin to date in WordPress, has a huge business built around it. His wife is now the CEO of it. And he couldn't make this work. Like this man with this position and this background could not bring WordPress rallying around this because of this democratic ideal where there's just a total lack of consolidation of authority and leadership and direction and vision. How do we fix that at this point? Is it fixable?
Well, yeah, Matt has to make some hard decisions. That's how it's going to get fixed. When I was watching the live stream of WordCamp US and they were rolling out Guttenberg and they were talking about all the stuff about it, first name's John, I forget his last name. He was sort of leading Guttenberg at the time. He was doing his presentation and it was very developer oriented. Again, I am not a developer, but it was like, here's all the cool things that you can do with Guttenberg, and it's code, feature. And it's like, WordPress needs a product person. WordPress needs a Steve Ballmer. to be up there and be like,
or Steve Jobs.
Yeah, or Steve Jobs, right.
Yeah.
I would say that maybe even Matt thinks of himself as a Steve Jobs to a degree. There needs to be that presence. And I do agree with you. I think Yoast does fit that part pretty well. And I sort of like a little tongue in cheek, when he took the position, I tweeted at him like, hey, just another step in, getting acquired. Right. And I mean that from like the whole like go get 'em entrepreneur, right? Because if anybody's going to get acquired, it's going to be Yoast. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, hey, awesome. If that's what Yoast wants to do, go for it. Everybody knows how this game works. And here we are a couple months after, or however many months it's been since he did it. And he said, yeah, I just can't do it. WordPress truly needs that kind of figure in there to be that product person, to talk to both sides of the camp. And to answer the question, I don't think it can be fixed until Matt is really ready to step away. And I don't think he is for like another 10 years, unless something drastically changes. There's a lot of people out there that say like, this is all like money driven. We have to give back to the VCs, venture capital, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people, because there are a lot of people are against that kind of thing. And I get it. I actually think that what we're seeing, to the detriment of you and I and maybe some of the listeners, is Matt is trying to outsmart the venture capitalists, right? That's the way that I see it. Whereas they might be looking at him like, hey, man, gave you this money. Where's our return? We're sick and tired of listening to the democratization of the web. We want some money back. And he's slowing them down. Like he's playing a different game than the rest of us to protect WordPress, but somebody has to lose. And I think it's going to be small plugin and maybe even the freelance web consultant, right? Because I think what he's doing is saying, hey, don't worry, VCs. I've got this thing called Jetpack. We don't need to go in and monetize core WordPress, right? People would flip out. They would burn the bridges if all of a sudden there was like an upsell built right into core WordPress that says host with us at Automatic or WordPress.com. So Jetpack is a way to appease those VCs and be like, let's not attack WordPress, let's protect it. But in front of it, we're going to put Jetpack, and that'll be the connection. So that's the way I see it. Like a lot of this stuff spinning out. It's while yes, it might be some VC driven, gotta get him a profit kind of thing. I think Matt is actually trying to outsmart the traditional VC approach. Is how I sort of, read all of this stuff.
That's an interesting take. And, Matt is an intelligent guy.
To protect the freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah, to protect WordPress. But again, like I said, somebody's going to get caught in the crossfire, and it's you and me.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think I don't think that kind of collateral damage even matters. So closing up here, Matt, I want to ask you an important question. And, I'm afraid that the answer might be depressing, but one thing I do appreciate from you and your perspective is that it's honest and that you call it like you see it, and you have a lot of experience to give a good perspective. So if somebody is coming into the WordPress space today, either as a developer or they're trying to build a business on WordPress, or maybe they're trying to run an agency, what do you think their outlook looks like in the next 2, 5, and 10 years?
So 2, 5, and 10 years. So if it's the 2-year outlook is come on in, the water's great. You can come on in and whatever you have planned, we can certainly use you. I think that what people might be afraid to do is share their ideas and really connect with other, even if you're just like a service agency, right? Connecting with other service agencies and not being afraid to sort of, reveal what you're doing, what you're pricing out, what kind of customers you're going after, because you're going to learn a lot, especially if you're brand new. Get those those war stories from other people, so you don't make the same mistakes, or make the same mistakes and certainly learn from them, because that's a lot of how all of this stuff plays out. For 5 years, it's really taking a look at what everybody's doing. I think we're still super early, and again, I'm not a developer, but looking where things are going with JavaScript and headless and Gatsby and all these other frameworks being built around WordPress. That's where what you really want to do is start to invest in what you think might be the cornerstone piece for the next 5 years. Like, what is it your agency or your product's going to do that is going to be, more bleeding edge? So it's like 80% of your work is traditional website, maybe some app building stuff. Maybe you jump over a little bit and go 20% of something that you don't normally get yourself into. Again, Gatsby.js or Gatsby themes or Gatsby.js is a great thing to look at because I see a lot of headway moving in that direction, right? And what people are building, around WordPress. For the long term, it's really picking something that, Dave, I know you're well into is e-commerce, right? Really looking at solving solutions for people with WordPress that they can tie back some ROI to directly. And that's generally going to be e-commerce. It's going to be membership. It's going to be publishers, right? These are people who are definitely using WordPress as they log into Google Analytics, they run a report, and they say 1 million page views made me $300,000 versus, a website where you're like, hey, you get some lead gen forms there. The value of this lead is $50. People who are just making transactions or making advertisement stuff online. I think making a decision for the long term for over the decade is picking a niche or an industry that's can be totally tied to online revenue without any guesswork. Software wise, that's a tough one for what a decade runs. But, a lot of people, since the whole Guttenberg thing, I don't know about you, Dave, but I know a lot of people who are now looking at other CMSs. So now WordPress is taking the same approach that I've been taking with a lot of these entrepreneurs that I mentor. WordPress is like the advanced level. So if you came to me, I interviewed the gentleman that runs Statamic, which is a static website CMS.
Oh, yeah.
Had him on the show, and Jack, I believe is his first name. And hey, great solution. If you had customers that are coming to you that only have like $1,000, $1,500, WordPress is not the answer anymore. It's just not the answer anymore. I mean, unless you're doing something super fast in Elementor or Beaver Builder, do something in a static, because then you don't have to update it anymore. You don't have to worry about the 50 plugins that you have in there, and is it backed up, and is the plugin updates process running? Ultra small site, build it on another tool. Find another CMS, and then save WordPress for the more advanced people, the people that are going to do some, again, e-commerce membership stuff. Plugin wise, well, make some blocks. make some blocks. Whoever's distributing the blocks is going to be the clear winner here, right? The more blocks you have, it worries me though. It does worry me. I'm worried about what happens to the price points of all this stuff. I'm seeing people now monetizing this. So this is crazy. So this is a little bit of a last rant here. So there's plugins that do a whole bunch of stuff, forms, e-commerce, membership stuff. And then, that's a saturated market. And all of a sudden, we dial it down to real, niche plugins, right? So maybe like mine, like Conductor or Easy Support Videos. And now, then there was a short race to like, let's build some awesome like content blocks. And I don't really see many people monetizing that, but now I see like this whole movement to monetize not the taskbar, but the editor bar, right? Like they're working to insert more stuff to click on, in the editor bar. So you have more options like inside the block. It's just like, man, like we go really big to bring it down a little bit. Now we're trying to monetize this one little block. It's pretty crazy, but I also think some long-standing software will actually succeed. I talked about this in the past. There's a headphone company called Grado Labs, and they're handmade headphones. No Bluetooth, no wireless crazy stuff, no LeBron James sponsorships. Homemade, made in Brooklyn, New York, I think, for the last 100 years, literally, and they're still in business. And they're not competing against Apple and Beats and Sony and Bose. They don't have the market to, but they're still in business. Solid product, strong, loyal customers, and they're doing it. They're doing it the way that they want to do it, traditional way, and they still have people buying it. Sort of like what you ranted about with Justin Jackson about picking a large market versus a small market. that was a great episode.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic. We've already ranted on that one. I won't add to that rant. Yeah. All right. So one last bonus question for you, Matt. If you wanted to like put a message out there that Matt or the core contributors or somebody would magically take up as a mantle and then push forward as the one thing that they focused on for the next year to improve the WordPress community, what would you say that should be?
It would be live streaming decision-making meetings, large, either core version updates or, when big milestones are being decided on. I know things happen in Slack, but there needs to be more visual. There needs to be more clarity around this stuff. And you call it an investor call or whatever you want to call it, like something where people can literally tune in and not have to be in Slack to watch all this stuff or read an email. Some kind of visibility, some kind of communication that says, in audio or video format, here are all the decisions, here's the thinking process behind all of this stuff. Podcast, right? He started a new podcast for the other venture, for the new software stuff that they have going on distributed. I want to see better visibility around these decision-making processes, not Track, not GitHub, not make.wordpress.org. Maybe I'm in the minority, but I want something that I can tune into and listen, visualize, and experience. Yeah.
I think transparency is a great thing, and we need more of that, especially if we're ever going to hope to, empower people to really take up a leadership mantle and operate without Matt being the benevolent dictator here. Because at some point, either he's not going to want to be the benevolent dictator or something is going to change and he can't be the benevolent dictator. And I don't know what that is, but until we can
he definitely wants to be.
Yeah. I mean, I think he wants to be, and as long as he retains control now, that's fine. But, there might be an event that precipitates a change on that. And I think it's probably coming. I can't tell you what it looks like. I can't tell you what's going to happen. But dictators don't live forever. So, right. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on today. And if anybody out there has any thoughts about WordPress, Guttenberg, Jetpack, you just want to rant, get it off your chest, send me an email, podcast@roguestartups.com. Maybe we'll bring Matt back and have yet another rant because, I love ranting and he loves it when I'm unfiltered, and maybe all of you do out there too. So until next week.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Rogue Startups. If you haven't already, head over to iTunes and leave a rating and review for the show. For show notes from each episode and a few extra resources to help you along your journey, head over to roguestartups.com to learn more.